right. Welcome to the Leva podcast, where we cover all things related to being a successful woman, mother, and professional, successful and happy, I should add. We have a special guest today that has inspired me a lot in my career. Her name is Sarah Lyons. Most recently, Sarah was the Executive Vice President of Direct-to-Consumer Global Product Management at WarnerMedia and Head of Product at HBO Max. That's pretty cool, right? I had the good fortune to work on Sarah's team at DIRECTV when she was the VP of Product and Program Management for the Digital Entertainment Products Group, which was a newly established group. So it was really kind of cool to see all of that come together and also to watch Sarah's career take off after that. During this time, I witnessed Sarah transition from being a badass leader to being a badass leader and mother to a newborn. I can still see the curtains that they installed in her glass office in El Segundo so she could pump in privacy. That was something to witness. In this episode, we're going to cover Sarah's career, her transition to motherhood, the vineyard that she owns, which is incredibly cool, and also what's on the horizon for her. I'm really excited to introduce you to Sarah. So, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your time. I can't wait to share your story with our listeners. Let's start by going into your background. You've had a really, really impressive career. How did you get started?
That's a big question. I really never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. And it's funny, I tell my son's now 10, which we'll talk about him in a moment. And he's like, I don't know what I want to be. And I'm like, I know. Why do they keep asking you? Because you don't need to know now. It's not important. There will be jobs when you're an adult that don't even exist today. So it doesn't matter that you don't know. So I was
true.
like that. I didn't know. And I went to college. My parents were very much, when you go to college, not if you go to college. And so I majored in communication because I felt like it was versatile and it could do, you could do anything with that type of degree. So I basically just kicked the can down the road. And then once I graduated college, I didn't know what I wanted to do still. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll go to grad school. Let's just kick the can down the road a little bit more until I figure it out. Again, I did grad school for communication and entertainment industry marketing, figuring that that was also very versatile. And I really never knew. I didn't have a passion for one thing or another. And at that point in your life, you're just so young, you don't know yourself and you don't know what makes you tick or what things you thrive on. So there really was never a plan. And so I graduated from grad school, and it just so happened that I had a friend that had an opening at the company she worked at, and it was for an assistant in public relations for what's now AMC Networks, but was previously American Movie Classics because they previously only showed classic movies. And so I was an assistant in the PR department, and I started at the very bottom, got coffee. Back then, it was normal to go like do dry cleaning and get people coffee and sort the
No
mail
kidding.
and all that stuff. Yes. And then worked my way up to actually doing some PR work there. And then from there, I left to go to a couple different PR agencies and it just so happened that I lived in Los Angeles. And so most of the work was around entertainment industry and technology. So I did PR for a few different companies that were kind of in that space, and then quickly realized that PR was good, but you never really could control your own destiny because at the end of the day, no matter how great you did your job, it was always up to the editor of whatever publication you were working with as to whether or not there was space to run your story. And so even the author or the journalist you would be talking to or have a relationship with, they didn't even have a say. It was their boss that was determining of the overall publication, like what can fit. And this was back in the day where a lot of paper publications still existed. So there was only a finite amount of space. So you could be so good at your job and your story doesn't get published. And I was like, well, I don't really like that I don't have direct control over my own destiny. So that was learning number one about myself very early on. And then I also felt like we were just taking whatever the business plan was for the company we were working for and doing the same type of script around it, where we weren't changing the direction of the business. We were just amplifying whatever that business's message was. And I also learned about myself, well, I want to have a hand in the direction of the business. I don't want to just be doing work that somebody else determined what that direction was. So I knew PR was not for me, which is actually also a good life lesson. Like, it's good to know what you don't want to do as well as what you want to do. And then it just so happened that I had a friend that had an opening at DIRECTV. And so I went and started at DIRECTV, and I started in the direct sales department. doing in essence what we call today growth marketing, where you're caring for new subscriber acquisition in a data driven format with segmentation and customer lifecycle management and an eye towards cost per performance, cost per sale, etc. And so that's where I started, again at the bottom, and I just kind of kept learning, growing, getting more responsibility, and that grew and grew and grew until one point where we were in the Great Recession. My husband laughs when I call it that. I'm like, no, that was really what it was called. Everyone calls it the Great
Right.
Recession. So it was like 2008-ish, and people were worried about the economy. People started shaving off services. So they weren't canceling DIRECTV, but they were cutting off any sort of ancillary spend that they could. So they were downgrading packages. They were not subscribing to premium channels. They were cutting off sports subscriptions. And so all these businesses that DIRECTV had managed that had a lot of revenue attached to them were on this
Yeah.
multi-year decline as consumers were shaving their spend. And so I got tapped to go in and figure out what's going on and address all of these businesses that supposedly were, going to be revenue generators for the company and turn them all around. Some businesses were what's called a subscription business, where you have customers that are paying a monthly amount to you to have that service. And then others were what's called a transactional business, where they could come in and rent a movie or pay for a pay-per-view fight, and it was just kind of one and done. And those two
Yeah.
business dynamics are very different from each other. And so there was a number of things to do to fix all of that and get it back on multi-year growth again. But the last bastion, like the thing that I had to get to attack, was the product itself. And so I said to myself, well, if someone can't find a movie to rent, then how the heck are they even going to come and rent it? And so that's when I started bridging over to product management with our engineering teams to say, well, how can we improve this experience? Even though we fixed all the customer touch points from price to packaging to offers and segmentation and churn management, how can we make the experience better for those consumers? And having that consumer mindset really served me well. And then also digging in with our engineering teams kind of helped bring me up to speed on more technology and how all these things worked. And that was the impetus for me moving into what I call the second half of my career, which was fully in product management and tech and building consumer experiences. So that's kind of it in a nutshell to how that trajectory came to be for where I landed at the end.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Personally, I love hearing your background because I didn't know a lot about what you just shared. So that's super neat. Just curious, when you had to tackle the different sides of things like the subscription kind of premium packages and add-ons versus the pay-per-view events that you mentioned, any key insights that you learned that kind of surprised you, or how did you kind of drive success there?
I mean, quite a bit. Like the thing with those subscription services is if you get someone to try it, the longer they stay with it, the more likely they are to stay into perpetuity. And the sooner they cancel, like after the first month, many people cancel. If you can get them to month 2 or month 3, then they're more likely to stay. And so it's kind of about that honeymoon period in the beginning, about making them delighted in the service to have them
Yeah.
want to stay on. And when you're working with those subscription businesses, your customer lifetime that they're with you is the most important for the company's ultimate profitability. And then on the transactional side, because it is so transient, it's a one-time purchase, you really need to be front and center from a marketing perspective when the event is about to happen or when it's leading up to the event that it is. And then you have to give them a reason to come back again for the next one. And so that one's really more about recency, frequency, how often they come to find something and purchase it. If you think about the world at large and different companies that are out there, the transactional recency frequency model is really one that stores use. Gap, determines how often does someone come into the Gap store or go into the Gap website. When they come, how big is their shopping cart? How much do they add in any given time? And then what's the pattern of which they return? And so you use those levers to manage those customer life cycles. And then whereas a subscription business would be something like, I don't know, well, HBO Max is the best example that I was working on, where someone comes and subscribes and they watch content and you want to make sure there's enough content there that they're going to want to stay.
That's awesome. So let's talk about what you're doing now. What's going on in your life at the moment?
Yeah, so at the moment, I'm actually in between roles. And so now I'm putting feelers out and networking and, tapping all of my resources to find my next opportunity. But I do want to be careful about what that is, because I want it to, again, be something that fuels my passion. And now
Yeah.
that I'm later in my life, I really know what that is. It's not necessarily one particular company. It's more about the environment that I'm in, the people that I'm working with, the type of role that it is, how important that role is to the company. And so it's a lot of the intangibles that are most important nowadays. And I think actually having time to go through these tumultuous experiences,
Yeah.
going through significant corporate change helps you learn a lot about what those intangibles are. Whereas if you kind of had an easy street your whole career, you might never really know what drives you. And so you might never find fulfillment in the role you're looking for because you don't really know what you're looking for. So, my dad always used to say that, having the hard road, while it's difficult when you're going through it, makes you a much stronger person in the end. And I do truly, truly believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I feel like, I mean, having worked for you for a period of time, and obviously the stories that you're telling here, I mean, you're clearly like a very intelligent person, total rock star. Like I remember being so amazed at how you could know everything. It felt like know everything about every project that was going on and all the product enhancements we were making. The domain was huge at that point in time, and I'm sure it only grew from there. So I think like the message here also for the 100,000 plus folks that have been affected by the layoffs recently is that it's not about how amazing you are when you have a moment like this, and strength and resilience truly do come from moments of challenge, like you just said. But even like amazingly talented people like you are affected in moments like this. So it's important not to get like down on yourself. It's really about like seeing the opportunities ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And and it's normal to feel down too. Like I have days where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, am I going to find a new role?" And then I have other days where I'm like, "No, absolutely I'm going to find a new role and it's going to be great." And you have this roller coaster you go through, and that is totally normal too. And I guess I just say, take care of yourself through that time. In any hard time in life, I always really try to tell my friends, self-care. Go buy yourself a latte when you normally wouldn't buy yourself a latte. Like whatever the little thing, go for a walk in the middle of the day. Whatever the little things are that really, help you get through it, that's important to take those moments.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. Anything else that like you have found is helping you kind of in this moment?
Yeah, so I then also always like to have my own side projects, my own passion projects, my own hobbies that I can focus on. So when you're stressed at work in your corporate career, having those things helps get your mind off the stress and actually focus on something that drives you and makes you passionate. And so thankfully, I've kind of kept those things going. And then during this time, when I have more time, I actually have more time to focus on those things that make me passionate. And the Vineyard is one of those areas. Super passionate about wine, and my husband and I have this little side business we've started with this vineyard that we eventually would want to have as a work stream in our retirement, because we're not ones to just retire, but at some point we want to go do something that we are absolutely passionate about. And so moving that business forward and having a moment to actually think about how to move that forward is great right now. So focusing on
Yeah.
that makes me feel like I'm having progress. I'm also the type of person where I have to feel like I'm accomplishing something. And so that's an area where I'm like, each day I can chip away at it and do a little more and feel like I'm accomplishing something there. And then I've also had a really amazing opportunity to volunteer at my son's school, which I've never had time to do before, which is
Yes.
so great to have that ability. And he sees me there volunteering, and it's really impactful on his life. And so not only spending time with my son, but kind of making an impact on other people's lives is a really great way to spend your time during the downtime. I network with other people that have also been affected and try to help them think about their personal story or what's their brand or how they talk about themselves in an interview. So things
Oh,
like
that's
that
great.
can really fuel you.
Oh, I love that. I'm sure that's like so helpful too. And I imagine you're doing a really great job at that. Let's talk about the vineyard since you just mentioned it. Let's touch on that. When did you start the vineyard? How did you do that while you were working full time in these crazy executive jobs?
Yeah, it's really was, again, just kind of always been a dream, but the way it unfolded was not necessarily planned. So we had been going and traveling up to, it's in Santa Barbara wine country, which is about a half hour north of the city of Santa Barbara. And that in itself is about 2 hours north of Los Angeles in California. And we had been traveling up there a lot because we live in LA, and it's, short enough drive to be able to go there for weekends. And after a while, we were like, well, this would be, since we're coming up here all the time and we're spending money on hotels, maybe we try to get a small little house and we can rent it out as a vacation rental when we're not up here and then use it when we're here. So it's not only a business investment, but it also then is more cost effective for us to actually come up here and visit. So we started house hunting, and then that snowballed into, well, maybe we should get something with a little bit of land. And then that snowballed into, well, wow, there's this property that became available that actually already has 2 acres of vines on it, of grapevines. Like, wow, do you think we can swing it? And so it was this huge leap of faith. Like we were super stressed in the beginning of it, but that's how anything new is, right? Every time you do something new, it's so hard in the beginning and it feels very overwhelming. And if you just take it bit by bit, it gets easy after time. And I use that in my head. I repeat that to myself every time I try something new. I'm like, it's always going to be hard in the beginning, but it will get easy. And so it's the exact same thing that happened here. And we found a great vineyard manager. So a person that can help us bring in crews to farm, that kind of helped us plant more grapes, that knows how to work and manage a vineyard. So we found someone that, funny enough, I went to the same university at the exact same time as he did, but we never knew each other. Fate is very funny that way. And so
Yeah.
he's great. And so he helps manage the vineyard when we're not there. And we've just been selling the grapes to other winemakers in the area. And often this will happen where people that make wine maybe don't have their own vineyards, or maybe they don't have enough. And so they'll buy other grapes. And so these are very high quality wines and very high quality winemakers that have been using our grapes in their wines, which is amazing. So we've been doing that for a while, but we are now kind of embarking on the next step, since I had this window of time to start to make a little bit of our own wine from our grapes. We'll still sell to other winemakers too, because we love to do that and form those relationships. But we'll be launching our own label, maybe, in 18 months or so.
That's so exciting. Okay. So if folks want to, and you should, by the way, you should want to, if folks want to learn more about your wine and how they can buy a bottle in 18 months when it's ready, how would they do that?
Yeah, so you can visit our website. It's lyonsvineyard.com. And we have some information there about ourselves, and then an ability for you to sign up for the list. And so definitely sign up. We'd love to have you. We'll send some communications in the meantime leading up to the release, and then I'll let you know as soon as it's available.
Fabulous. And I will put the link in the description and everything for the podcast too, so folks can find it.
Awesome.
Now let's head back in time to 10 years ago when your son was a newborn. And you were so excited about this baby. I remember this being like a total transformation in your life. How did the expectations you had fit with the reality of becoming a mom?
Yeah. To your point, we were just at a point in our lives where we were ready. And so we were super excited about it. Although I was incredibly nervous, I have to tell you, about taking maternity leave because I
Yeah.
was very career driven. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be gone for 3 months. What's going to happen? Are they going to realize that they're all good without me? They don't need me anymore. And I kept trying to like minimize how long I was going to be gone. And so that was very, very nerve wracking. But fortunately, I had an executive coach at the time that was really valuable to me. And she gave me a lot of great advice. She was like, look, let's work on a plan. We'll put together a PowerPoint deck for the plan of your exit and re-entry. And she's like, and the re-entry is very important, the important part of the plan. And so what you'll do is you'll outline the time you're going to be gone, who's going to be taking over for different areas of your job while you're gone. And then you'll outline how you're going to come back. And she said, and when you come back, what we'll do is we'll talk about, now that your team has stepped up and taken on more responsibility of yours, what additional responsibilities you're going to take on when you come back to elevate yourself as a leader and elevate your team. And that
Oh, wow.
plan, I always just feel so much better when I have a plan. Really, that gave me something to think, okay, I think this is going to be okay. And fortunately, I had a very supportive team around me. I had a very supportive leadership team. And so everyone was really, really incredible through it all. And I actually remember I was so surprised because I still was a little nervous when I came back to the office. I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. What are they going to say? And I remember one of the gentlemen that was working for me at the time was like, oh my God, Sarah, thank God you're back. I was like, They want me back. So that was awesome. I like came back to such welcoming open arms of everyone on the team, which was amazing. And so that really made going back to work fun and invigorating. And so it gave me back that piece of myself. What I didn't realize, when you become a mother, especially in those first 3 months, I mean, it is all consuming. Like, that is everything. And you are no longer you. You are just doing everything for your newborn, and you aren't even thinking about anything for you. And so I never realized how important that was. And I don't mean that in a selfish way. I just mean in a way of, it's good to have balance. It's good to, be all about your child or your children, but also have your own thing. Because I think if you have your own thing, you're much more balanced with your child. You're a much more even keel parent. You're a much more objective parent. And when you're
Mhm.
with them, you give them your all because you've already had your time. And that's super important, I think. No matter what that your time is, if you don't work, it doesn't have to be work. It could be whatever your passion projects are on the side. But I think to be a really good parent, you have to have both. Um, and so anyway, another great learning point about myself was that kind of transition back, and that understanding of being able to have that balance is super needed as a human being.
That's so interesting. I love what you shared about the exit and reentry plan, kind of having that in place and knowing how you're going to up level. That's really, really cool to think about. Like, yes, people did kind of step up and fill in. And now that means I'm going to come back. My role will be different. And I know that it's going to be different. And I need to accept it's going to be different because that's going to make things better for me as well. And then to your point about being more objective, because you have other things outside of just focusing on your newborn, 100% makes sense. That's
Yeah.
really good perspective.
And then the other interesting thing that I didn't realize would happen is kind of the reverse. Because your newborn at home is so all consuming and difficult, honestly, back to everything's difficult in the beginning and it gets
Yeah.
easier. You go back to work, and the executive that's on, some other department that used to be a thorn in your side, that used to be difficult, you're like, I'm all good. I have difficulty at home, and working with you and dealing with you is easy. So, you know what? We're good. And so it gives you like more perspective at work to deal with the drama.
Yes. Ugh, that is so true. I also didn't realize, like, I've never been a patient person at all, and then having a baby and going back to
Yeah.
work, I feel like it gave me this different
Yes.
ability to be patient and take
Totally. It gives
things.
you patience. So much
Yes.
more patience. Yeah, it's very true. Very true.
Okay, I already mentioned that you had curtains in your office. Did you breastfeed your baby? You clearly pumped, like, how did all of that go? And did you have specific goals set up when you first had him?
Yeah. So I my goal was to breastfeed for year one. I'm like, I want, all the things you read is, best for the baby, and the, natural immunity, and all the stuff that I'm sure all of the listeners have read in, in every single book and every single article. So I was like, okay, year one, want to breastfeed. In the beginning, when we first started and left the hospital, it was kind of hard the first day or two, but then it got to be okay-ish, but I didn't know what to expect. And so I don't know if it really was okay or not, but and again, you're kind of like fumbling your way through it, and no one really knows, and there's no one really to help you. And I did at one point get a lactation nurse to come to the house just to make sure, to see if I was doing it right. And she was kind of a help, but not tremendously a help, and we couldn't like have her be there permanently. And so I was kind
Yeah.
of on my own to figure it out. But it was seemingly okay. And then all of a sudden, my son would be very hungry. And as a mom, you get to know your baby intuitively, and you should trust. My tip of advice: trust your judgment, because there have been times where
Yeah.
someone like, oh, just stay at our house a little longer, I want to hang out with the baby a little longer. And I'm sitting there thinking, he's going to want to leave, like I can tell, like he is about to want to leave. And I was like, well, I'll just, we should just stay, some family member, whatever. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, 2 seconds later, he like bursts out crying. And I'm like, yep, I knew it. Should have left. So
Yep.
just your mother's intuition, right? So there would be times where he would be so hungry. I'm like, I can tell he's starving. And I go to breastfeed, and he starts to ravenously feed because he's hungry. But then all of a sudden, he would scream out in pain. His face would turn red. He'd arch his back. He'd pull away, and he would refuse to to eat. And I'm like, why is he doing this? I know he's hungry. And then at first I'm like, well, maybe he's just not hungry. Maybe he thought he was hungry, but he's not, he doesn't know his own body yet. And so I kind of kept pushing it to the side, but I should have listened to my mother's intuition. So this went on for a while. And the only time I could get him to breastfeed was in the middle of the night, like to really feed, because he was asleep and maybe wasn't cognizant. And so, and then the other thing coupled with all this is he wasn't sleeping. And when I say wasn't sleeping, I meant he would only sleep maybe 8 hours out of a 24-hour period.
Wow.
Often 7 out of a 24-hour period. And everything, again, you read about babies is at newborn stage, they should be sleeping 13 hours at least out of a 24-hour period. And I remember going to the pediatrician, and our particular pediatrician was not there that day, so I had to see a different one. And it was this man at the clinic that had been there for years. And I hate to say it, he was not very friendly, and he was not very understanding of my situation. And
No.
so I went and I said to him, I'm like, this baby is not sleeping. And he literally rolled his eyes, and he's like,
Oh,
it's a newborn. And I'm like, let me tell you, because I've been tracking it on my piece of paper log where I've been writing down anytime he eats and anytime he sleeps. Well, let me show you. Total this up. It is 8 hours in a 24-hour period. When I say he's not sleeping, I don't expect a 10-hour night worth of sleep in a row. I just expect more than 8 hours for a newborn. Like, this doesn't seem normal. Something is wrong with him. And this doctor would just brush me off. And I'm like, okay. So, I went home and I started doing tons of research online. And again, my son wasn't sleeping, so I was up all night. And
yeah.
the only way he'd sleep is if he was laying on my lap. He wouldn't lay down in any sort of crib by himself. He wouldn't lay down in a rocking chair, none of that. And so I had to have him like kind of upright on my lap in order for him to sleep. So I would stay up all night long. I would take a quick nap from like 5 to 6. And then, my husband would watch him. And then I would get up about 6, and he would sit on my lap and actually fall asleep. Cause I'm like, I got to get this kid sleep. Cause if this kid
Yeah.
doesn't sleep, like, he's not going to be healthy. So it was like, I have to get him fed and I have to get him to sleep. So I'd be up all night with him sitting on my lap, sleeping. And then I'd be using my other hand to scroll the internet, looking for forums, finding pieces of information to try and piece together what was going on with my kid. He's not eating. He cries in pain when he tries to eat. He's starving, and he's not sleeping. And finally, through all that scrolling, swiping, posting, I figured out that he had what's called reflux. Some books call it GERD, GERD, but more commonly moms had referred to it as reflux at the time. And in essence, it's almost like acid reflux in an adult, where you eat food, and if the food has a certain composition to it, and we can talk about the things that actually spur that to happen for a baby, it feels like lava going down their throat. And so no wonder he's starving and he goes to eat and it feels like he's drinking lava. And so then I went back to our normal pediatrician. She was back and she didn't know much about it. She was very willing to learn, though. And so she and I had a lot of discussions, and she started doing research so she could educate herself. Meanwhile, I was educating myself on it, and to go through and try and figure out what to do about all this. But so the cause of this, to your point on the curtain and the pumping, since he would never breastfeed because it hurt him. I still was like desperate to give him my, the mother's milk. I just started exclusively pumping, and I pumped for a year, and had to pump so much to keep my milk production up, because pumping does not produce as much milk as breastfeeding does. And so I had to pump a lot in order to keep up enough to have enough to feed him. And then I also had to change my diet in order to keep giving him my milk, because the things I was eating was part of what spurs on more reflux symptoms. And so yeah, it was like one of those things where I went back to work and I'm like, I'm going to have to pump multiple times a day. And we have a brand new, beautiful office with glass walls. I have nowhere to go. So I need curtains. Yeah, it was a little bit of a fight with facilities to get curtains up, but finally I convinced them.
Oh my goodness. That is crazy. And it sounds like the story about the doctor, not the original doctor that was there because your other real doctor was like out, not real doctor. He was a real doctor, but clearly not a very compassionate one.
Yes.
Rolling his eyes. That would be, I mean, as a mom, he should be empathetic.
Right? but he's never
And
been
knowledge.
to them.
Oh, come on.
Because he didn't get it. Yeah.
So did the baby take the bottle better than the breast? How did that work?
So what I had to do was have him be more upright. And so
Yeah.
if you think about, like, if ever you get acid reflux as an adult and you lay down, it gets worse. It kind of comes
Yeah.
up more. And so keeping him upright while I was feeding him helped. And then I did have to change my diet. And then we
Mhm.
also ended up putting him on Zantac. There's a baby prescription type version where they liquefy it, they emulsify it into a liquid that you can give the baby. And so through a combination of all those three things, but this took, to figure all the piece parts out of what needed to be in place to fix it, took a lot of, sleuthing and, like, A/B
Yeah.
testing, my management days, and, like, understanding what works and what doesn't work. And then that process took, at least a month and a half, if not 2 or 3, to get him feeling better again. So it took
Yeah.
to figure all everything out of what we needed to do to make it better.
And that is a long time in a newborn baby's life,
A
that
long
and a new mom's life. And you're
It's a
like, "Oh my
long
gosh," stressing over the situation.
Yeah, so we didn't start solid foods with him until well past 6 months old, because I was like, "We've gotta get all this stuff fixed first before I introduce any other variable into the equation,
Yeah.
so I know exactly what's going on." And so I can't remember exactly what month it was, but we delayed solid foods, we delayed sleep, having him sleep on his own in the crib. Like, we delayed a lot of things so that we could just get this part right.
And you also mentioned, through your research, you found a book that really helped you, and you ended up recommending it to your pediatrician as well,
Yeah,
right?
and so it was actually a coworker at DIRECTV that I don't know how, 'cause I'm usually not one to, like, share personal stories like this at work. Um,
Yeah.
so it must have been a really bad day. I must have had, like, no sleep, and I must have been like, "Sorry, I had no sleep. My son has reflux." I must have just said something to that effect because I was just, ugh, over it. And anyway, this coworker was like, "Oh, my," I think it was his aunt, don't quote me on that, but it was someone related to him had written this book, and he's like, "I have this
Oh,
relative that
wow.
wrote a book about it, let me give it to you." And that it was game changing, like, it was amazing. And so, that helped a lot, and then it also helped at least me understand certain things that I could then go online and then search more forums to find more information, more pointedly after having seen that book. So,
That's
yeah.
phenomenal. That's awesome. I will also put a link to the book so folks can find that if they're in a similar situation. One other topic I would really love to touch on. I mean, you mentioned you're in LA, so you're in California, which has better parental support, parental leave than the rest of America. Did you have any challenges around finding support, workplace support, or any of that? Did you have to navigate anything when it came to
That's a great
maternity
question.
leave?
So I was very fortunate in that my boss and the rest of my peers and the whole team was very supportive. Thankfully, just generally, like, emotionally supportive. From a, like, policy or statewide perspective, the thing I didn't know, but a friend had tipped me off well in advance. Thankfully, the company will give you leave, so you can take the time, but you will not be paid unless you sign up for short-term disability in the state of California. And you have to sign up for short-term disability ahead of being pregnant, because the whole thing about disability is you have to have this, it's like an insurance policy. You have to have the policy in place before the accident or issue happens. So you have to have signed up for short-term disability before the pregnancy happens in order to be
Wow.
eligible for it. And so thankfully I had a friend that had a baby well before I did, and I must have been before we, started being ready to have a child. And I was like, if we might be ready soon, let me just sign up for short-term disability this year, because you have to do it during annual enrollment, I believe. And so it's
Oh
like,
my
October comes around, you got to know, am I going to try to have a baby this year or not? Which is really tough. But then that way you at least collect whatever that percentage is of the short-term disability, which is not full pay, but it's, whatever the state policy allows, it's something. Yeah, that's how it is at most companies, I believe, in California. But at least you're guaranteed the time to take the time off.
Yeah,
You're guaranteed to have your job back when you get back. So you've got that security blanket. So yeah, just a tip for anyone living at least in this state and
great.
check out other states' laws. The short-term disability thing is key to know in advance. But the
That's
other
awesome.
thing I will say that a piece of advice that I give everyone if you can do it. So it just worked out that well, I took the first 3 months of our son's life. And then my husband just so happened to be in between movies he was producing for work, it kind of right after that 3 months. And so then he took paternity leave month 3 to month 6 of our son's life.
Great.
So I had the first 3 months and he had the second 3 months. And so we were able, and especially since we were going through the reflux thing, it was good to be able to string along a parent being home through that month 6, because really month 6 was when he started getting better. So it was beneficial for that from that perspective. But it was also really key because it gave my husband time home alone to be the sole parent, and
Yeah.
at the slightly older stage of our son's, early life. And what that did was forever cement us both as equal parents of this child. I feel like my gut was, if my husband had never done that and it was just me at home, no matter how well intentioned my husband would have been throughout the rest of our lives about being the strong father for his son, my son would have just come to me, because it would have been just nature. Oh, it's been mom home, so I'm just going to go to mom always. If I need something, it's mom. If I'm sad, it's mom, whatever. Because my husband had that 3 months solely alone doing everything with him while I was at work, it made our son go to either of us. It like
Amazing.
equaled the playing field. And so I strongly recommend that for any set of partners out there. If both of you can take leave and you could stagger it where you're taking it at separate times, it forever sets you up for a more balanced, kind of fruitful future with your child.
That's a fabulous insight. Kind of wish that I had done that. We didn't do it that way, but it sounds like it would have been super helpful.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you. Okay, let me go. I will have to ask, did DIRECTV not have a parental leave policy, like a paid leave policy?
So there was that, just the policy that you're allowed to take leave, and your job is guaranteed when you get back.
That's fascinating. And
Mhm.
that's that is such a crazy thing with our country, that we don't have that, right? Like, we are one of the very few nations in the world that doesn't have that, and we're really the only, like, advanced developed nation that doesn't have a paid parental leave policy that is in effect for all mothers.
Yeah.
Um, I was at USA when I had my baby, and they had just started a new policy that allowed both parents to take I don't want to say what exactly it was, but it was quite a bit of time paid off.
Oh, that's
So, I
nice.
took some time, my husband took some time, and we were able to use it in the first year. So we didn't have to take it all at once.
Uh-huh.
If we knew we were going to need it later, we could use it later. It was really nice, but I don't think I realized how different that was than other companies,
Yeah, totally different. And it's interesting to me because, there's a lot of talk now, of course, which is fabulous talk, about more women in the workplace, and we need to figure out how to get more women in the workplace, and we need to keep the women in the workplace, and, women in higher level positions. And it's like
right.
that right there, and childcare, those are the two things. Like, help that and you can help more women in the workplace, I
Yeah.
mean, right?
Yes. A large part of what I hope to do over time is be able to kind of make a dent in that. So starting here, but I think you're right. Policy needs to change so that we can actually support women in leadership and
Yeah.
women in the
And
workforce.
the other thing, like, I try to pay it back if there's opportunity, and I have women on my team that have children or are about to have a baby. I'm very, open about any advice they might need, but B, like, take whatever time you need. I know you're going to do your job. So, you leave if you need to leave at whatever time during the day. I know you're going
Yeah,
to log on later, like, go do whatever you need to do, and be supportive about them going and doing whatever they need to do so that they feel like they have that flexibility. And so I think that's another thing we can do is, women in careers that have the ability to make sure that other women on your team know it's okay to do is really important.
yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I love that there are people like you in leadership that are supporting other women so that they can have that career that they want to have and also be able to be a mom if they choose to be.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. And
feel like
I,
the more
I
we have
feel like
that, the better we are.
Yeah, and I
Sorry.
feel like earlier in my career, I wouldn't want to talk about my son because I felt like that was going to be a hindrance. Like, I was
Yeah.
worried that if I talked about being a mom, other men in the workplace would see that as a deficit, or would, kind of brush it off, or it might make me seem less powerful at work. And so I wouldn't talk about him for years. I really didn't talk about him much. And now, just I guess through the past maybe 4 years or so, I've been much more open, and I've found that my team resonates with it tremendously because again, they feel like it's okay and they know you can do both. And I'm like, all right, that outweighs any sort of concern I have about anybody else,
Yeah.
worrying about me being a mom. So
That's great. I'm so glad to hear that. I love that. Okay, we're getting close to wrapping up. I am curious. So you and I have talked about Leva and Leva app. Any thoughts on what we're doing and any feedback on if you were running marketing for us and we had the ability to afford your genius, what would you recommend we do?
So I think the app is so needed. Like I mentioned, I was tracking the things that you guys are tracking in the app, but doing it on notebooks and paper and pen. I actually found the notebook the other day, funny enough,
Oh,
in one of this like random drawer in my son's room when I was looking for something else of his. And it's like,
oh
oh
my God, that's
my gosh,
amazing.
it's amazing. And it's got my handwriting in the notebook. And then my mom came to help a couple times. So it's got her handwriting. And then it has my husband's handwriting from when he was doing his 3 months. It's
Oh,
so sweet. He did all the tracking. It was
that's so
amazing.
cool.
So it's definitely needed. And I think will be super helpful because it's much easier just to do a quick click, click, click on with one thumb on your phone than get out a notebook and pen and paper. The community that you'll provide and the resource support will also be super helpful. It will take the place of me hunting and pecking online like I did in the middle of the night too. So I think it's really, really great. I think just to your point, having women know about it and know that resource is there. And so if I put my marketing hat on, I would say that you're hitting a life stage of your user, and other products, other services, other places that consumers go in that same kind of life stage moment is a great way to get in front of them. And so if you think about life stages, we at DirecTV actually operated a lot on life stages because when someone buys a home, they need to get a TV service. And so typically that's the point in time where they would, opt to put a satellite dish on their house because now they own their home. Kind of similar though, when you buy a home, that's around the time often that you're thinking about having kids, or maybe you just had kids. And so, any sort of other service where home buying or home decorating or home renovation is happening might be a good place where you're catching someone in that life stage. Buying a car also is another life stage thing. Maybe you're going from your pickup truck that only seats two, or your, little, I don't know, Fiat that only seats two, to a more family appropriate car. That might be another place where you could reach someone that's entering the life stage of either about to have children or just had children. Often, if you're placed in areas that are very baby centric, I feel like you might get lost amongst a lot of noise of a lot of things. Now, it's probably good to be there somewhat because, some mothers might be going there specifically to search out a tool. Expanding beyond that will help reach a larger audience.
I love it. Thank you. That's so great. The car example reminded me of my tiny Volkswagen EOS convertible that I
I
struggled to put
remember
the
that
car.
car.
I was
I
struggling for
loved
years
that
to get
car. It
that.
was so great.
It was so much fun. I did not want to get rid of it, but I eventually did because it was completely impractical. Oh man, that was amazing. I love it. Is there anything we didn't touch on yet that you wanted to cover?
I'm trying to think. I don't know. I mean, I guess, yeah, the only thing I'll just say is it does get easier. I consciously have myself cherish every moment because it
Yeah.
does go by so fast. And especially if you are balancing work and family time, then those moments are even that much more precious. And I really try to be present when I'm with my son, and I'm not looking at my phone. And I actually at work have established that with people. I'll say, hey, tonight I'm doing XYZ with my son. If you need me, text me because my iWatch will bing me, but I'm not going to be checking my email because I'm trying to be with him, and I can hop online later if I need to once he's gone to bed. And so I think establishing that balance is totally fine to do, and you shouldn't feel afraid to establish that balance, and then just try to be present for every moment and appreciate every single thing because it goes so fast. This morning I was doing drop off duty at his elementary school. So the elementary school has this car line that drives through the parking lot. And in order to keep the kids safe, they have parents volunteer to usher the cars through. And then the cars come through and they stop. And then you open the door for the child to get out of the back seat and walk up to the school. And so each
Oh, cool.
week, a different class parents volunteer to do the car line. Anyway, so I was doing the car line this morning, and I'm standing out front, and cars are going by, and I'm opening doors, and kids are getting out. I'm helping with their backpack, and they're walking up to school, and all so cute, like little kindergartners, so cute. And then my husband walks up to bring my son to school because since I was there so early for car line, my husband needed to drop him off at school, and they cross the crosswalk at the appropriate time when cars aren't going by. And then he runs over and gives me this huge hug and is like, "Hi, it was so good to see you. I miss you." And I'm like, "Oh, savor this. He's in 4th grade. It's only going to last like 2 more years." So yeah, savor every moment.
Oh my God, that's so sweet. Thank you for sharing. That sounds so beautiful. I'm
Yeah.
not emotional. That's great. That's amazing. I love it. Okay, this was amazing. You are amazing. Thank you so, so much for your time. I was taking a
Absolutely.
few notes because I wanted to recap some of the genius that you shared, and I know I didn't catch it all because I was really immersed in your stories here, but it's okay when you're starting out to not know what you wanna do.
Totally
You're
fine.
gonna discover it along the way.
That's right.
And your
Oh, and the
friends
job you may have might not even
yeah,
be in existence at the time you start off.
that is so true. Yeah, it may not be, and who knows what's gonna happen with artificial intelligence, right? It's gonna be a
Exactly.
whole different ballgame. Your friends can give you a good break along the way, but it's up to you to build your career and really grow. Understanding customers have been a huge differentiator in marketing and product management, and you've been able to leverage that in both. Customer retention is made in the early moments. I love that. I'm going to totally apply that into what I'm doing with Leva. So thank you. Even if you're a badass like Sarah, you will encounter challenges, and roller coaster emotions are normal when you're going through change like that. Focusing on self care can be different for everyone. It can be about helping at your kid's school. It can be about grabbing that latte, going for a walk. It could be about starting a new side hustle, like having this amazing vineyard. Maternity leave, having a plan for exit and reentry is really, really important. And also finding a way to balance childcare with your husband in the early months can be super helpful with creating a balance in your relationship. I love that. So much good stuff. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for being with us, Sarah. This was amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to be here. Hopefully it helps anyone. If I help one person, I'm super happy.
Yes, I'm sure you will. Very cool. All right. Thank you, everyone. Don't forget to check out www.levaapp.com, and you can find our app for expectant and new parents in the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. We are live. We've been live for about a month, so we're excited to support you on your journey.